Thank you so much for tuning in to DCRE TV. We have a great interview for you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, do I have an amazing interview for you all today? I have no other than Debbie La Franchi, an alum of UCLA as well as Georgetown, also the founder of SDS Capital. Debbie, thank you so much for joining me here today. I appreciate your time on this gloomy Saturday afternoon.
Thanks so much, Niles. I really appreciate being here. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So I like to start the interviews just talking about the roots. You know, you pretty much your origins, your family origins. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up I'm a Californian. I've been here my whole life, with the exception of a few years on the East Coast. San Rafael, up in the Bay Area, about 30 minutes from San Francisco, is where I was born and grew up.
Oh wow! So you're a Bay Area girl.
Yes, I was. It was a little too cold for me, so I migrated south to Los Angeles over time.
I'm sure many people have followed those footsteps. All right, so let's talk about your family. You grew up with your mother and father, brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I grew up with my parents, had two younger sisters, just a few years younger than me. We all have left San Rafael over time, sort of in Southern California now, and my parents are in Palm Springs. So we've all migrated south, it seems.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's so cool. And then you said brothers and sisters. Tell me about them. What was that relationship like? Was there sibling rivalries, or you guys and gals all got along just fine?
Yeah, we all get along well. We got along pretty well growing up. My two sisters were probably a bit closer. They shared a bedroom when we were growing up. I was the oldest, and I also played competitive tennis. So I was playing tennis before school, after school. I was on the road on the weekends, going to tournaments. So I think they spent a lot more time together than I did. So I think growing up, they were a bit closer versus I was sort of out there doing these other things. So that was sort of the dynamics we had.
All right, then. So let's unpack that tennis thing, because it sounds like you were obviously training practically professionally, right?
Yeah, I had coaches. I played, I don't know how many hours a week, did all the tournaments, was ranked in Northern California, loved sports. And I did end up playing in college. I never really wanted to go pro, but I just enjoyed competing. That was, for me, that was the end all, was just to be in competition and enjoy it and push myself. So that was how it worked for me.
That's interesting, because I just watched, about a year or so ago, I watched that movie with Serena Williams and her dad and that whole family dynamic. And the amount of practice you have to put in, because it's an individual sport, so it's all on you. The amount of hours you have to put in, family members have to devote, the travel and to the cost, which was implicated in the movie. So was that a little bit of your lifestyle too, where from sun up to sundown, I guess maybe with only school in the middle of that, you were just playing tennis?
It was pretty intense. In middle school, I would wake up at 5:30. My coach picked me up at 6. We would drive to these indoor tennis courts where about 12 people would drill each other and play. And then I'd have to go get ready for school, get to school. I mean, by 10 o'clock a.m., I had already eaten my lunch, because I was so hungry. And then after school, you're back at it on the tennis courts. And yeah, tennis is a really intense sport. I'm glad my girls play for fun, but, and it is individual. So you're kind of out there on your own, on the road by yourself. It really prepared me. It's a very mental, psychological sport. You're almost playing against yourself. I mean, you can practice and practice and practice, but you got to be able to hit those winners on those clutch points and not let your head get in the way, so to speak. So it does really, it prepares you for life, I think. But it was intense, and I didn't really want my girls to go through that. So we never went that direction at all with them. They play soccer and other sports.
Cool. Now, what would you say, or who would you say is your favorite tennis player of all time? In your opinion, who inspires you as a player?
Yeah, I really admire Serena Williams, what she's gone through and how long she's extended her career. I was, heartbroken. She didn't break the record like many people were, but my goodness, her career went so many years. And, that family, I mean, I live in Los Angeles, so I'm well aware of the challenges of Compton, and being in economic development and low income housing, South LA, to kind of rise up in the tennis world. And it is a very undiverse sport on top of it. They had unique challenges as well. But, both of the Williams women are just stellar heroes in my book.
Yeah, definitely. No, I totally agree. Okay, so going back to your life, so you were playing tennis, you're going to school, I guess you were graduating high school, and what was the next step? You were going to go to college. What was your thought process and what was your path in getting into college as a younger person?
Yeah, going to college, I was completely focused on school. I wasn't focused on tennis. So for me, academics was number one. I really wanted to go to UCLA. It was my dream school. And I thought, if I make the tennis team, great. If I don't, so be it. They were number two in the country at the time. I was on the team. I did make the team. Loved it. Played with, Stella Sampras, Pete Sampras's sister, was a freshman with me. We had a great freshman group, and she's the coach today, which is great to see. So I did play on the team, but I was really focused on academics, and I also did a lot of internships in Washington D.C. because I wanted to go into public policy, focusing on poverty. I also studied abroad. Right when the Berlin Wall came down, I switched my application from going to Florence, Italy to Budapest, Hungary, because it was the only campus in Eastern Europe I could go to that the UC system had a partnership with. And, it was amazing living in Eastern Europe after, the fall of communism. I mean, I was there right during that transition. And that definitely also played into my wanting to continue sort of looking at what causes poverty, solutions to poverty, because I had seen how these Eastern European countries, under dictatorships and communism had just been pummeled. Their economies were decimated. I was in Romania, right after Ceausescu had been, taken down and killed by the military, and the stores had empty shelves. There was no food, there was nothing. So it really cemented in my mind, wow, what government does, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Eastern Europe or other parts of the world, has such a huge impact on the quality of life of the people and whether they even have food to eat. So that was a great experience. And that's why I went to college for school. I wanted to do internships and study abroad, and I was fortunate. I came back and I was still able to play on the team because I wasn't one of the scholarship players. Obviously, I would never be able to do that. So it was a nice mix of strong education focus, but able to do these things that helped me move forward in the pursuits I wanted to do for a career.
Wow, awesome. Oh man, that sounds amazing. Sounds like you had a wonderful experience too. So you were in DC and then you came back to the West Coast?
Yeah. So I did a number of internships while I was at UCLA, like over the summer. I worked in the U.S. Vice President's office. I worked on the U.S. Congressional Committee on Hunger. I also worked at the Brookings Institute, a think tank. So I tried to work in the different, think tank, Congress, executive branch. And then when I finished college, I went to Georgetown University for a master's in public policy, and I focused on poverty. I did my master's thesis on the Watts Enterprise Zone here in Los Angeles. Was that program working or not working? Was it actually bringing companies into South LA to create jobs or not? And And yeah, and I really enjoyed that program, and really enjoyed the next steps after, where I came back to Los Angeles to work for Mayor Reardon, focusing on those very issues.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like you did a lot. You've done a lot for the community out there in Southern California. So, what was that like? I mean, you're really in the trenches. Right? I mean, wow, you have witnessed a lot, and in those times. So that was like what, the '90s? Like that was bare bones, right? You know, a lot of controversy back in those days.
Yeah. So when I finished, when I came back from Georgetown, that was 95. And that was a tough time in Los Angeles. We had gone through the civil unrest. Companies were leaving Los Angeles. We had tremendous levels of gang violence at that time, homicide rates. Crack cocaine had hit the scene, urban. I mean, and it wasn't just LA. I mean, LA was certainly one of the most challenged urban communities in the country. But urban America was, just having an outflow of people, that had been going on for about 15, 20 years, jobs, people, tax revenue. And, we had a historic sort of election here. Mayor Reardon was elected, and just on the he took $1 a year. It was a successful investor, Angelino, who believed in the city, and very ironic because this is a very democratic city. Everybody knows that about our politics here, and he was a white Republican male business person, exactly who you wouldn't think would win an LA election, but he ran on hey, I'm here to get this city back on track. I'm here to focus on crime and jobs. And I joined his administration, and it was such a game changer for me, because it was such a bureaucratic city. And he said, listen, we're here to make a difference. Don't ask permission, ask forgiveness. Otherwise the bureaucracy is going to stifle you all. When you see something needs to be done, go and do it. Don't wait for the gears of the bureaucracy to slowly grind and get the answer. Go make it happen. And I don't know, I was 26 years old and I listened to that. I thought we were supposed to. I think we were supposed to. And it was great. I was able to do some really neat things in terms of reforms at the city level that would bring more businesses to our inner city communities. I eventually became assistant deputy mayor for economic development. And one of the things that became a huge career pivot for me under Reardon is we said, we're out of money. The city's out of money. There's a recession. The state's out of money. The feds aren't going to bail us out. We got to come up with our own money. So we thought, why don't we build some private sector, some funds that are capitalized by the private sector, and we'll use that money to invest in South LA, East LA, and we had all these shut down defense sites because the Cold War had ended. And so all these jobs that used to produce Cold War machines and weapons, were now these contaminated sites. So we brought in a consultant to say, how can we build some private equity funds that will invest in our poorest communities? And I was tapped to be the lead. I'm in my mid 20s at the time. I didn't even know what private equity was. It wasn't what I studied. I was focused on a career in government and poverty, and that's how I was going to make a difference. And I worked with the consultant, and we brought in some fund managers, and ultimately launched 3 different funds: a real estate fund, a mezz debt fund for manufacturers, and then the country's first workforce housing fund. And I helped kind of put all of those in place with the different managers, working with the legal teams on all the documents and pitching with them and raising the money. And we did raise all 3 funds. They were under the Genesis LA initiative, which is still around today. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really amazing. We're using private sector money to do the things that we were trying to have government do, but government didn't have the flexibility or enough capital to do some of these things. And I did run the Genesis LA nonprofit for a few years to get it off the ground, and it's still around today, doing a lot of new market tax credits and great things. But I ultimately realized that I wanted to be completely in the private sector where I just had more freedom to create the types of products I wanted. So I started SDS Capital Group in 2001 to be an impact fund platform focused on engaging the private sector in the battle against poverty. So I just did a complete pivot out of government and nonprofit to really change it. Still focused on poverty, but using a different tool, creating a different toolbox.
Right. Let's clap it up. Let's clap it up. Wow, what a story. Oh my gosh. Sounds like you were on the front lines, and sounds to me, you know, that may have really changed a lot that was going on there and helped to uplift the communities and the city overall. And you also had an amazing just opportunity to start at, to your point, the genesis of all this amazing change that happened. And then, did you always know you had an entrepreneurial bug inside of you? Like what? Obviously, you said you wanted to get outside of the public sector, but did you always know you had something you always wanted to get into entrepreneurship?
You know, it's funny, the two things, well, there were three things I thought I would do. Own my own company, run for office, and sort of teaching at some level. And my parents owned a small grocery store growing up. And then my entire family worked there. My parents, my grandfather, my aunt. I mean, from the time my sisters and I were in third grade, we were doing whatever we could do in third grade, stocking the shelves that were the lower shelves in the store, or, you know, and by sixth grade, we were running the cash registers. And I do remember one day I said to my dad, you know, because when you're a kid, you don't understand everything. And there were other employees there. And I said, well, Dad, who owns the store? You know, because I was intrigued with this idea of who the owner was. He said, well, who do you think? And I named every employee he had, right? Like, is it Irma? Is it Jen? Is it, you know? And finally he's like, no, it's me, you know? And it was like, oh, that's really cool. You own it, you know, like you're the boss. And so I actually did kind of have an entrepreneurial bug just from, although it was kind of crazy because I saw the hours my dad worked. I mean, being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you don't have to work a lot. It's the opposite. You know, I didn't quite catch on to that, you know, later in life when I wanted to start my own company. But yeah, I did think that was a path. And actually, when I launched SDS, I had to make a decision because I had really thought that at some point, the way I would make a difference in poverty was running for office. And I needed to make a decision. Is that the path I want to go, or do I want to start my company? This is 2001. And I knew that if I was going to start a company, it had to be all in. It was going to be, and that's the path. I sort of thought if I could get this platform of impact funds off the ground, I could help more people stuck in poverty than if I became a politician. I don't know if that is correct or not, but that was the decision I made at the time, that these types of impact funds are needed in the United States of America. We need more tools than just government and just nonprofits. We need to get the private sector. And so I did think that, you know, if I can be part of making this sector of investing happen, because it barely existed in 2001. We had done a few funds in LA, but it was in its infancy. So that was the decision I made, kind of pivoted and said, I'm not going to really, I mean, I teach sometimes, I get invited to teach at a class or something at UCLA, and that's good enough for that ambition I had. And I straddle the public policy arena. I work with a lot of politicians and here locally on advisory and kind of helping with, you know, how to attack poverty and what tools are needed. So I'm still sort of doing the three things I wanted to, but heavily into the entrepreneur side, obviously.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. Now, before we go into SDS, I want to spend some time on SDS. Let's go back to, you know, your family. So they owned a your dad was the owner of a grocery store. Does your family still own the grocery store? Are you still in the business?
No, it became really tough. It was a small store. I would say it's like double the size of a Trader Joe's. It wasn't a huge store, and they had trouble competing. I mean, this is another thing. I really saw how real world economics impacts small businesses. I mean, my dad worked my entire childhood, almost every day, barely took vacation. So I really saw how small businesses, I mean, and we had to work. I mean, it wasn't like I got paid in Star Wars cards and bubble gum. Star Wars was the big movie when I was in elementary school, and money doesn't mean much to a fourth grader, right? So my dad paid me in the Star Wars bubble gum trading cards, and but as a small business, the family had to work, and so the big competition started coming in, the Ralphs and the Safeways, and it was just too tough for them to compete. So when they retired, they still have the property. They rent it out. My parents are retired in Palm Springs now in their 80s and doing well and healthy, which is great. But it was a tough business, because it changed dramatically over sort of all the big stores came in and they had to try. So it also gave me a lot of empathy for the challenges of small businesses. The recessions were really rough on us. I mean, my dad had to get rid of his employees, and just the family ran the store during recession. So we had a real big dose of how the macroeconomics of the country or global economy just impacts a little store like ours. And we had some tough times for sure on making sure it stayed open.
Well, I appreciate, your family's contribution to the community that you served back then. So I know that's obviously helpful, providing that type of service of food to the community. So let's go back I want to jump from that. So let's go back to UCLA. So you got your dream school.
Yeah, I'm a Bruin. Blue and gold blood, twice.
Twice, right. So let's break that down. So undergrad at UCLA, you're on the tennis, you're playing tennis. What was it like overall going to school at UCLA back in those days? Was it a great experience? Was it not what you expected? Like, what is your perspective and shout out to UCLA, all the UCLAers, please like, subscribe, comment, support the channel. But what was your perspective and your experience on UCLA, Debbie?
I loved it. I had such a good time. I loved the dorms. I loved my teammates. I would walk down to Poly Pavilion and watch all the basketball games, all the volleyball games, going to the Rose Bowl, football games. I loved, I felt like I got, I was a public school student from kindergarten through college, and loved being a Bruin. Couldn't have asked for more. The challenge, if I said like the downside of the UCLA experience is, you get thrown in as a freshman into, Econ 101 with 400 people, and it is a sink or swim kind of school. And I just remember seeing those supply and demand curves, and that we didn't have economics in our high school, and sort of being like, what is this? And how I need some, it was 400 people. And so it was definitely, you had to kind of, if you needed to figure something out, you had to go figure it out. Nobody was going to help you. And I think for some sense, that's a good thing. It makes you a little more resilient, and you gotta figure out how to make it. But it was a little intimidating once in a while in terms of just, smaller private school. You're going to have so many people help. We all know how that works. It's a very different type of situation. So, but I loved it. I just absolutely loved it.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
I want to go back. I'm jealous. My daughter is just going through the college acceptance process. I'm like, you're going to love it. I'm so jealous. You're going to have such a good time.
Well, again, shout out to UCLA and the Bruin family. I know they watching this would love to hear your story and can relate to some of your experiences as well. What dorm did you stay in on campus when you were there?
Stayed in the oldest one, unfortunately, Dykstra, which was ancient when I was there. I certainly hope they did something to fix it up, because it was, but it was fun. It was right on the edge of, right at Bruin Walk, and loved it. Back then, they've done a ton of more student housing now, so I'm sure it's very different. Then there was such a shortage. They literally were putting 3 people in 2-bed dorm rooms because they just didn't have enough. But it was a great time.
Awesome. And then tell me about, so you went to, eventually you ended up going to Georgetown. What was the DC experience like? You're a West Coast gal, Bay Area, SoCal, and then you go to DC. Totally different type of environment, as well as, employment base. Although you wanted to get into public policy, that's where you went, but was it all that you expected, or did it fall short? Let me know.
I loved Georgetown as well. I love school. If I wanted to be just completely self-indulgent, I would have gone and gotten a PhD in history and just stayed in school forever and keep reading. And I like school. But Georgetown, I loved. At heart, I'm a policy wonk. I mean, that's what I thought I was going to do, be in public policy, focused on poverty. And what I love about Washington, D.C. is everybody there is pretty damn informed. I mean, because it's the policy center of the world. I mean, it's where Congress and our executive branch and the Supreme Court, and I just love being immersed in that. You have the top international experts there. You have, no matter what area of policy, the people there are just so well informed. And so you just have these phenomenal conversations with people that are just so in the weeds and the details of these really important policies that are happening. So I loved that. I loved being up, till 2 a.m, just talking policy and politics with people. And everyone was just really up on all the information and what was happening in the world. So to me, that was a really exciting place to live. The program itself, public policy, is very teaches you how to be very analytical. Is this working or not working? If it's not working, what needs to be fixed? How do you fix it? What are the steps? And for me, even as an entrepreneur, it's a very helpful way of thinking, because you're constantly in life just confronting problems. And it's a way to get to sort of, well, here's where we need to get to. So what I didn't feel I got enough of, though, was sort of that business, budgets and business and managing and really understanding the cost of things and the financial markets. And it is a reason I went back and got my MBA later, because I did feel, while the public policy program gave me a good understanding of how to evaluate whether something's working or not and fix it, it didn't give me a good understanding of capital or management or these other parts of the equation that I felt were important, that I felt like I had an Achilles heel when I was talking with business people. So I did go back, and of course, what I'm doing now is a complete merging of public policy and finance and business. So, both of those degrees were very, very helpful to the foundation of being an impact fund manager at the end of the day.
So tell me about what is it like starting out your first? I mean, was it just you in the garage? Like, give me day 1 to day 100. What was that experience like?
Yeah, wasn't quite a garage, but it wasn't far from it. I actually partnered with a friend of mine, Tanya Faulkner. She was low-income housing. Her experience was low-income housing tax credits, and I was economic development. We were two sides of the same poverty coin, but different expertise. So we thought, oh, great, you'll be the housing person, I'm the economic development. So the two of us started, and we had an intern and we had one other person. We didn't have a server. We just used our existing laptops. We were on a shoestring. We each took a massive pay cut to start the company because we didn't have any clients. What we did is we converted our former employers into our first clients, which was nice. So we kind of had a nice soft landing to get the company off the ground. So I continued to help Genesis LA. That was, I launched that nonprofit after I left the mayor's office to continue creating these funds for Los Angeles. And when I started SDS, I said, hey, I'd like to help Genesis. I said to the board of directors, I'd like to help you continue growing, help you get new market tax credit allocations and advise. So I still consulted for them, which gave me some paycheck. She consulted for her former employer. But ultimately it was interesting. We're very good friends to this day, and we do other business ventures together, but we were very different. And a business is like a marriage if you have a partner. I mean, compatibility is very important, and having a similar vision and where are we going. And ultimately I wanted to be a fund manager. She wanted to be a real estate developer. And we just, over the first year, kind of realized, maybe we have different ideas of where we want to go. And we just kind of split and went different directions. I kept the company. She's doing a lot of other cool entrepreneurial stuff right now. So I kept SDS and focused on building the fund platform that I had envisioned rather than being a developer, which was her vision. So that's what happened. But it was a struggle. I mean, we just consulted. I couldn't raise funds because to be a fund manager, you have to, as you know, you need to already have assets under management, AUM, and track record. And I had none. Even though I had helped launch the 3 Genesis funds, each one of those, and they were cumulatively more than $200 million that I was helped, structure those funds, raise that capital. But at the end of the day, I wasn't part of those management teams. So I couldn't count any of that as money Debbie La Franchi, managed. So SDS Capital Group had a big, donut hole. When you say, what's your AUM? 0.
Oh, wow.
So I had to figure out, how do I get AUM when no one will give me capital, because I don't have capital. I didn't start with any base. So I had to, consulting was how we paid the bills, a lot of economic development consulting. And then I had to do a lot of partnerships, joint ventures with groups that had AUM to build a track record. So my very first partnership was with Belden Daniels, Economic Innovation. He was the consultant that helped us build the Genesis funds. So I had worked with him and we knew each other. And I said, we should go after new market tax credits and he's retired now. He's 90 years old. So he's got a few years of experience above me. And we used his track record to apply, and we received 25 million. So we finally had AUM. Yay! And so we built a back office for it. We invested it in the Katrina impacted area of Louisiana and Mississippi. Some amazing projects, bringing back the Ochsner Hospital that Katrina wiped out. We helped fund the surgical unit to bring it back into operation. But importantly for SDS, it was our first AUM, assets under management, that we could claim. And again, it was a joint venture because I didn't have the track record for the federal government to award us. Belden did. And then when I did my next partnership was with Sinair, their big LIHTC group out of the Great Lakes. And we partnered with them, as a 25% partner, SDS was, in building a $58 million impact fund for Michigan, really focused on bringing Detroit back. So that was right after the great financial crisis, and we convinced the governor and the state to put money in that fund and the private sector. So again, I'm 25% of that fund. And then the next fund in the Deep South, which is a fantastic fund we have, the American South Real Estate Fund. My partner is Vintage Realty Company, David Alexander, great partner of mine. And we have over 230 million in 2 funds in 10 states in the South, doing all impact affordable housing using private sector capital. And that's a great, 50-50 partnership. And now what's really nice is SDS, we finally, we're at about 1.3 billion of AUM on our platform.
Yeah. Hold on. Clap it up for SDS Capital.
I mean, it took a couple of decades, but and now we, we have funds where we're 100%, and our track record is enough for me, to go out and launch new. So our newest fund is our homeless fund in California using private equity. That fund is 190 million.
Oh my gosh, Debbie. Woo! Wow. Oh man, I mean, we're respectfully laughing because I can't imagine the amount of effort and work that, you put into this. I mean, I can't imagine, and that's why I'm like just so stunned, because it's not easy. And with your background, nobody wrote you a check and said, here you go, have at it. It was kind of, you were leveraging other people's experience and track record to finally build your own. And, what made you stay in the fight? Because you could have said, you probably could have joined someone else or something else. You could have returned back to government or joined a brokerage shop. You could have done a lot of things. I'm sure you had the connections and the know-how, but what kept you sticking to SDS Capital?
It's a great question. My husband has asked me that 100 times over 20 years. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I really didn't, and entrepreneurs, I think, are in general pretty optimistic people and thinking that, I can make this happen. I have the vision. Here's how. I had no idea. It was at least 10 times harder than I thought it was going to be. I really made a big miscalculation. When I started, in 2001, I was 31 years old when I started SDS. And I really thought, after helping launch 3 Genesis funds with private capital, I thought, oh, wow, this is the tip of the iceberg. The investment world is ready for impact funds. There just aren't any out there for them to invest in. I mean, that was my thought process as a 31-year-old wanting to make change and make a difference. And so if I can just help build more of these, they will come. I mean, that was my little business plan in my head, right? If I could just build them, they will come.
How wrong I was.
Well, I was completely wrong. I mean, it was, what I didn't calculate was that those 3 Genesis funds were pretty much all the same investors. I mean, if you look at who invested in them, so they were duplicates. So it wasn't really 200 million of new capital in these different funds. It was the same 15 investors in each of the 3 funds. And they were pretty much all banks. And they were banks for a simple reason. Banks are under Community Reinvestment Act. So they have requirements to look for these types of innovative investments that have impact on low-income communities. And there were just a few foundations that were in them. But I made the mistake of thinking, wow, we raised 200 million. What we really did was we attracted 15 investors to something that was new. And there really wasn't much appetite when you go back to 2000. I mean, impact investing didn't exist. Back then we called it double bottom line: do good, do well, make money, make a difference. And then it became triple bottom line, adding the environmental on. And then impact investing is sort of newer, in the last 10 years. But there really wasn't a whole lot of appetite. Back then there was social investing, which was more put your money in some type of mutual funds that screens for maybe a few things. And it was very concessionary. It wasn't the concept of risk-adjusted market rates of return. It was, hey, you're going to make a difference. We're supporting, investing in companies that are doing good things, but you might have a lower return. And it was actually handicaps impact funds like ours, where we've had to sort of re-educate investors. Well, wait a minute, there's a genre of impact funds today, 20 years later, where we are actually seeking risk-adjusted market rates of return, right along with the other fund managers that are non-impact. And so evaluate us based on our track record and what we're doing. Don't just think that we're concessionary, below market, giving you a return that's below what you'll otherwise get. So it was tough because most investors, they weren't there yet. They just weren't there.
Oh, wow. They weren't there yet. Would you say they're there now?
There are more there now.
Okay, well,
There are more. And, there's so much going on with ESG and impact and how it's different in different industries. And when, ESG, of course, is a huge issue now globally. And of course, there's a backlash happening in the US for different reasons. That's a whole nother topic for another day. But when you think about impact, when you hear impact funds, most of that nowadays is focused on clean energy, climate change, whether it's venture capital, private equity, clean water, new energies, solar, and technologies. I mean, impact is very broad. When you look at the ESG and the whole, we are the S. We're poverty, social. And the poverty portion of kind of this impact spectrum, so to speak, is quite narrow compared to the clean energy and green technology, all the money going into that. And so, I think it's almost easier to sell institutional investors on, hey, we've got big water issues globally and in the US in certain geographies. So these clean water technologies could make you a lot of money. A lot of venture capital or energy or new ways of doing things can actually be extremely profitable. When I go to investors and they see that we're investing in the most distressed communities of America, their mind doesn't naturally flow to, I'm going to make money on this. Their mind goes to, oh, this sounds like something I could lose money on. So it is a much tougher sell to educate institutional investors in the S, in the poverty, part of the impact spectrum, that wait, here's why this is a good investment for you. And this is why you are going to make a market rate of return. They just focus on they're just picturing a very poor community and how are we going to get out of here with a decent rate of return. And for me, it's so straightforward, but it's not for everybody. And what to me is straightforward when you just look at affordable housing in our country. Here's the demand. Here's the supply. This is the problem. And this is where we're at. And we're finding the real estate developers that are here, and they know how to use private sector capital to do this really efficiently and to get the kinds of returns that our investors want. So we don't even view it as higher risk at all, because we're going into communities that haven't had any new affordable housing built in 30, 40, 50 years. And the pent-up demand is so strong. As soon as we fund the project and it's built, those units are filled and there's a wait list. So there's a big educational component that comes with what we do.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say? Well, let's two things I want to cover. Let's talk about your team, and then let's talk about, I guess, maybe one of your most interesting or deals that you've done or projects you've created. So how many people are on your team?
So at SDS Capital Group, we have 22 people. We've got a few up in Oregon. We've got our new market tax credit originators in St. Louis. And then on our Southern fund, because that's a partnership, we have an additional 5 people that are fully dedicated to that live throughout the South, the footprint of that fund. So collectively working on our products, about 27 people.
Wow. Okay. That's it's good size. And then what would you say has been one of your most interesting deals to date?
Yeah. Well, I would say right now, I live in LA, and I could drive 20 seconds in any direction and I hit a homeless encampment. Not even 20 seconds, 10 seconds. We've got a crisis in California. So as I mentioned, we have $190 million, SDS supportive housing fund that's completely dedicated to and it's all private sector capital, focused on building permanent supportive housing units, typically 80 to 120 units per project. And, there's no one development within that fund that jumps out, but the fact that we have 835 units of homeless housing in construction today in California with that fund, using private sector money for the land acquisition and the construction, no government money for land or construction. And I'm really proud that, and we're funding a developer, RMG Housing. That's just excellent. And they are able to do that development at $240,000 per unit. Wow. All in, land, construction, hard costs, soft costs, when everybody else in the LA market is doing it for $600,000 to $900,000, predominantly using taxpayer subsidy. And so I'm just really excited that, we're really on a whole new path of how to think about housing our unhoused and how we could do it quicker, more scalable, using less taxpayer subsidy to build more of this in a much more cost-effective way. So for me, that's really exciting. So it's not one project. It's sort of the concept of, again, how the private sector has a role here that's been underutilized. And if you can figure out how the private sector can get a risk-adjusted rate of return, that's a huge reserve of capital you could potentially tap for America's social problems.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing, Dad. I'm loving this interview. Thank you so much for being on here. So my next question would be emerging manager programs. Have they been helpful in your path to success?
Yeah. 22 years later, we are still an emerging manager, and we'll probably be an emerging manager for another 10 years. Emerging manager is an interesting concept because for some investors, you could have $5 billion of assets under management and still be an emerging manager.
That's that.
$5 billion.
I know.
I don't think I'm emerging anymore. I have emerged.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because I read some of those, these pension funds list their emergency management programs and participants, and I read it, I'm like, are they an emerging manager? So to your point, that is so true. But go ahead. How's your experience been so far?
Yeah, well, for me, they're absolutely essential for SDS to be able to grow. Our funds are kind of stuck at about 175 million to 200 million. If we cannot tap public pension fund money, that is one of the biggest, categories of institutional capital. And the challenge a lot of people don't understand is that while there's so much capital, they need to put their money out in such big increments. If you're talking to CalSTRS or Texas Retirement System or even smaller pension funds, smaller states, they can't invest less than 50 million or 100 million at a time. And so for an emerging, while I would love to have one investor give me 100 million, they also don't want to be more than 10% of your fund. And, so it's this chicken egg. You got to get bigger before your fund can absorb. You need $1 billion fund to absorb $100 million investor. And how do you get to the billion, how do you get there? Chicken and egg problem. Yeah. So what's great is, that some pension funds around the country, they hire groups like GCM Grosvenor, which recently invested with us. And they say, hey, we're going to give you 500 million Grosvenor, and then you chop it up and you underwrite and you go find those smaller, particularly women and managers of color, because we tend to start organically and grow from fumes and build up versus going the big corporate route for 2 decades and then lifting out with the group and taking $1 billion or $2 billion of investors with us. So we grow organically, we start smaller, and we have this chicken and egg. So Grosvenor takes the pension money, chops it up. And so, we hit a huge watermark this year. Grosvenor just invested 50 million into our American Real Estate Fund 2.
Oh, wow. Clap it up for Grover. Wow, congratulations. That's amazing, Debbie. Great to hear. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a big watermark for SDS and for the American South Fund, because what it does, Niles, is, as I was saying, it's so hard to educate investors that you can be impact and still get risk-adjusted rates of return. But when groups I'm talking to now for our third fund in the South that we're going to be launching soon, they see that Grosvenor puts 5 pension funds in our fund. With pensions, we hope to start getting our funds up to the $400 million range. They're essential for small managers. You can't grow if you can't get pension money. So I wish there were more of these platforms, and that more pension funds were engaged in emerging manager platforms. More smaller managers would be able to rise up if there were more of that activity happening.
Well, Debbie, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on this platform to share your amazing story. 20-year overnight success. And congratulations on your most recent award allocation, from Grosvenor. And we wish you nothing but the best and much more allocations in the future. And one of the reasons why I have this platform is to highlight, minorities, military, allies, women, founders, all of it. Give people a spotlight that and you've been on podcasts before and you've been highlighted before, but keep on highlighting these individuals. Like you said, it starts organically, especially if you don't have those connections or that pedigree or whatever the case may be. It starts organically. And I'm a big believer that we have to help each other out. We have to help ourselves, help each other out. And hopefully, like you said, one of the big boys and girls swoops in and gives you an allocation, helps you with your fundraising, et cetera. So it's an awesome story to hear. So I think we covered SDS Capital, and I wish you and your team the best going forward. Shout out to everyone at SDS. Appreciate all the hard work. You guys and gals are making great strides, doing great work within the communities that you work in. Let's fall back a little bit, go to the more, I call this what I call the rapid fire questions in the interviews. This is where I ask you a few questions, pretty much softball, easy to answer questions, and you give me, quick answers. So first question I always ask is, what's your favorite color?
Red.
Okay.
Even though I'm a Bruin, it used to be blue. I just love red now. I shouldn't because it's the Trojan color, but it's red. I don't know what to say.
It's true.
Okay. What's your favorite car?
Car? I really love my car. I have a Tesla, and I love it. Yeah, it's all good. And it's red.
So you're a Tesla gal. Cool. Okay. What's your favorite place to vacation?
Oh, wow. Travel is one of my, since I lived in Eastern Europe, like I mentioned, if I have a week off, we're on a plane somewhere. I've backpacked around the world when I was in my 20s. So I've been to about 50 countries. I can't pick one, but I'd say Italy. I just keep going back to Italy. Then Thailand's a close second because I keep going back to Thailand also. They're just amazing.
Okay, awesome. Okay, what would be your favorite movie?
My favorite movie, I'll just say one right now. I'm really looking forward to the second Dune movie, and I'm taking all my staff to it. I said, watch Dune 1, Dune 2 is coming out, and I thought it was super cool. I kind of like those science fiction, futuristic type things. So right now, that's my favorite movie.
That's awesome. Yeah, Dune is a classic. That's a classic movie. I remember the original back in the day. It's a classic. Okay, what is your favorite song?
Oh gosh, I should have thought about that one more. I don't know. I will say I did go to the Taylor Swift concert with my daughters. I appreciate her. So even though she's not necessarily one of my favorite songs, like just as an entrepreneur, I love her music and seeing this empire that she's built. So her music means something to me more because of who she is and what she's done. But yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Taylor Swift. Hey, Taylor. Can I get a sponsorship, Taylor? Can I get a sponsorship? Okay. Now, what is your favorite, this might be a little obvious, but sport? Give me sport one and then second favorite sport two.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite sport is actually beach volleyball to play.
Okay.
Yeah, after I finished UCLA, I didn't pick up a racket for 25 years.
Wow.
I mean, my racket rotted. It literally deteriorated in my garage. So I was sort of done with tennis, which, it served its purpose for the first quarter of my life. But beach volleyball, I love. And my husband and I both, when we met, we took up beach volleyball in our 20s. Unfortunately, we're both too injured and old to keep playing beach volleyball. We keep pulling tendons. So it is my favorite sport. And my daughter's starting beach volleyball. So I have to live vicariously through her on that sport.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't just want to assume tennis. That's why I asked the question. But no, I thought it might be something else, and seems to be right. So yeah, shout out to beach volleyball players. Okay, so you know what? You've mentioned husband and you've mentioned daughters a few times now. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your husband. Let's talk about your daughters. Who are they and how are they doing? And how do they influence your life?
Yeah, well, I mean, my husband's wonderful. Ken Main, we met at UCLA. He was finishing his graduate degree in economics when I was finishing undergrad. So we've been together for over 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we're, we both love travel. We love sports. We just have a wonderful time. He's wonderful with our kids. I'm on the road a lot more, just with raising money and with my job, being pretty intense. And he's just, great with the kids and kind of taking on more of that burden. We do work together after the great financial crisis. He was a portfolio manager for another firm, and we were looking at launching public equities ESG products. This goes back to 2007, before anybody had that kind of product in the market. And we had launched it, and we had our first clients on our platform, and then the great financial crisis hit, and we sort of decided it's too hard to have this many products that we're raising money for. So we pivoted away from that concept. And so he does help run SDS Capital Group, which is great, mostly on the new market tax credit side, which I don't do as much on anymore. So we spend a lot of time together. We're at the office right next to each other in Westwood. And then my kids are both really into sports. They love school. My daughter's, getting ready to go to college in the fall.
Where's she going?
She's gonna go to Johns Hopkins.
Oh wow, cool. So she's coming to the East Coast.
Yeah, and I'm super excited because she's wants to do computer science and apply it to homelessness, and how you can use data and really look at what's working or not working, kind of more from a macro perspective. So I'm excited because she's wants to go the impact route as well, which is really, really nice for me.
Awesome. Touches my heart. And do you have another? Yeah.
Yeah, and then Jackie's 14, eighth grader. She's super into club soccer, very competitive athlete, and into her school, and she's just really driven in that. So it's great. It's great seeing them both just become their teenage and now moving into young adulthood. It's been a great journey. They're great kids, really great kids. We're very fortunate.
That's awesome. Let's clap it up for the family. Oh, wow, Debbie. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I can imagine a beautiful family, and they sound so accomplished. Husband sounds like a great guy. 30 years. Oh, that's amazing. I'm not married yet, but I hope that when I do get married, 30 years is the minimum.
Yeah, he's a trooper for putting up with me. I have to say. I mean, he's made of Teflon or something. So yeah, it's good. All good.
All right, well, this is what I call the cool down session of the interview. This is where I just ask you a couple leisurely questions, just to kind of cool it down a little bit, since we talked about so much. Tell me about some of those leisurely activities that you do. Is it swimming, hiking, running, dancing? What do you do on your free time when you're not so busy with SDS Capital?
Yeah, I wish I had more time to do art. I love painting. And it was funny, when COVID hit, I thought we were going to slow down at the company. Like the kids are home from school, everybody's working from home. It's March 2020. So I put a big Costco table out and we put all the paints on it. And literally 6 months later, we were so busy at SDS actually launching our homeless fund at that time during COVID. After 6 months, I'm like, I guess I should put the art table away. We haven't done art one single day during COVID. So I have not had leisure time to do that part. But one thing I have been doing more to focus on my health, because I got very unhealthy the last decade with the hours I work and the way I was eating and not working out. I was starting to have health issues. So I really kind of stepped back, and I started doing these big annual hikes about a year and a half ago. So it would force me to train. So 6 other girlfriends of mine, we did the Inca Trail in Peru about 18 months ago. So I had to really train for that, to be in shape to do, hiking in the Andes. And last summer, did a big hike with 5 people total, the Camino Santiago in Spain, kind of an old pilgrimage to this small town, a lot of religious significance to the town. We were doing it more for the experience. And it was 100 miles in 7 days, which was a little bit grueling. And then I'm training now 7 girlfriends and myself. We're all going to go to Mount Blanc in France next July, and we're doing 7 days of hiking. And, we're at about 8,000 to 12,000 feet up, doing about 9 to 12 miles a day. And we're doing 3,000 to 4,000 vertical a day.
Oh my God.
So that's probably going to be the hardest hike of those 3. So I just kicked off my training, and I've got a lot to do to be able to handle that, but it'll keep me focused.
Oh my gosh. And when is this?
That's in July.
It's coming up.
This summer. So yeah, I gotta get training. It's around the corner.
and what's that weather? Is it hot in that altitude? Okay.
Too high.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think the heat will be the issue. The vertical each day is going to be the issue. Doing 3,000 to 4,000 vertical is more than I'm certainly used to, and at elevation. So.
Well, look, Debbie, be careful. We need you doing great things out here in this world. So that sounds like an amazing experience, as well as physical training session, but. Be careful. Yeah, it'll be great. I'm sure you guys will have a lot of fun. And it's also cool that you're hanging out with 7 girlfriends.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice thing that we've developed. It's a neat. And then we do hikes in between to train for it. And yeah, it's become something we're kind of focused on doing the harder ones now, because as we get older, they'll need to get easier and easier. So it's like, okay, let's do the ones that 10 years from now we know we're not going to want to do.
Yeah. Hey, you know what, Debbie? Now that I think about it, this sounds like it could be a script for a movie out there in LA. 7 girlfriends hiking the most dangerous terrain known to man. That would be a great movie. So. Yeah, cut me in on some of that if you actually start filming and create a movie like that. But okay, so what about other leisurely things you're doing? What are you watching on Netflix lately?
I just started Constellation, which is interesting, kind of thriller. Oh, but my husband and I just finished Slow Horses on Slow Horse. It's a British series on MI5, the spy agency, and it's sort of like the flunk outs from the MI5, but it's a great series. I love it. I'm kind of into spy stuff, so I enjoy when there's a good series about those types of things.
Okay, cool. And then I guess the last leisurely question I'll ask you: who have been like the 3 most influential people in your life? Well,
for sure, my parents. without a doubt, just seeing how hard they both worked, growing up, running just a small family run grocery store, as I mentioned. And just they were sticklers for always do the right thing. There's only one right way, do the right thing, even if that's the hard decision. It's really the right decision. They were always such great supporters of mine on everything I've been endeavoring to do. So certainly the two of them take the top two spots. And then along the way, I think I was just fortunate. There's no one person, but I really had some great mentors, whether it was at my internships or different jobs. My partner, Belden Daniels, I mentioned, we partnered on new market tax credits. That was my first joint venture. And Belden is, 35 years older than I am. He's retired now. But I have to say, without that partnership, there would be no SDS Capital Group today, because and it wasn't just the fact that he had the track record to help us get our first money. It was that he was just such a great mentor, and he had built his own company over the years. So he knew all the struggles I was dealing with. So he was always just such a great sounding board and always calm and helped me think through things. And he was the original impact person. I mean, going back to when Ireland had its first peace funds, he helped launch those. When Eastern Europe, the wall came down, he had offices in Eastern Europe, kind of launching what would now be called the first impact venture fund. So those would be the top people, along with my husband and friends. Yeah. I've been really fortunate. I have great people around me. I'm really lucky in that way. So
awesome.
Really grateful.
Cool. It's always great to reflect. And my last question of the interview, which is a major reflection question. If you can go back in time and you can meet, whether it's little Debbie in the grocery store or, at UCLA or Georgetown or back at UCLA or working for the city of LA, what advice would you give your younger self at any points of any points of time? What advice would you give your younger self?
It's interesting because last night I had a kind of a bigger conversation with my 14-year-old on exactly this. And I literally said, if I could go back to middle school, this is what I would tell myself. And because she was dealing with some issues where some of the people in her grade aren't treating other people very well, or saying things that you shouldn't say about them, and they're not doing the right thing. And I gave her an example of a girl that was being picked on in 7th grade by a bully girl, and the other girl, of course, was sort of very nice and sweet, but the weaker personality, and of course that's who people pick on. And I said, I did stick up for her, and I told the one girl, why are you picking on her? She's doing nothing to harm you. She's nice, and maybe she was a little quirky, but that's fine. It's not a reason to make fun and to hurt somebody. And I said to my daughter, I said, I'm glad I stood up for her at that point, but there were also a lot of other times where I also wish I would have done that sooner or earlier or more often. And I said, what's interesting is when you call someone out on that, when they're doing that, it makes them not do it in the future because it's not comfortable getting called out. I know that other girl was embarrassed when I called her out in front of people, and she thought about it. And I said, I wish I would have done that more often, and had that voice even in lesser occasions, to just in a more nuanced way, wait a second, you don't need to do that. And my daughter said, Mommy, this is great advice. I'm really going to think about this. And I am going to tell my friend who's doing this that maybe she needs to, there's no reason to do this. And so it's ironic you're asking this question, because I just had that conversation last night that I would have kind of wanted my voice to be there more often than it was. It was there, but not, I could see where I could have used it more often.
Yeah. No, we appreciate you sharing that awesome perspective. And your daughter appreciated it. We appreciate it. I'm sure everybody watching this video appreciates it. So Debbie, I appreciate you joining me. on your weekend time, took away from your family and your friends. I know you're super, super busy. Again, I met you at the VIP, and you were kind. We got to connect and follow up afterwards. So I've heard about your amazing story, met some of your investors in person, and I was like, oh man, I gotta reach out to her and feature her story on my platform. As you know, that also supports, underserved communities, and promotes diversity, and just wants to give people like yourself doing amazing things in the commercial real estate realm and on the economic development realm a spotlight. So, whatever I can do to help, let me know. And again, I appreciate you sharing your story on this platform. Thank you so much.
Oh, Niles, thanks for having a platform to tell these stories. I know you've got a lot of great people you're talking to, and hopefully it helps others see kind of how these journeys happen, and they do have successful endings. Sometimes they're a windy road to get there, but appreciate you taking interest in these types of stories.
Yes.
Thank you.